So here's a blend of video game lore and Canadian geography to ponder. In the game Perfect Dark, if you strafe about the Carrington Institute area, one of the computer terminals has a bunch of information about all the in-game locations that you encounter. And interestingly, if we scroll down to the crash site stage, we see that it is located at 71 degrees north, 118 degrees west, which is actually on Victoria Island, Canada. So incredibly, one mission in Perfect Dark actually takes place in Canada. So what is there to know about this Victoria Island? Well, firstly, it's the second largest island in the entire Canadian Arctic Archipelago at a staggering 217,291 square kilometers. This is the 8th largest island in the entire world. It's one spot ahead of Great Britain, believe it or not, and one spot behind the island of Honshu, the largest and most populous in Japan. So Honshu, while only slightly larger, 8,000 square kilometers larger than Victoria, has a population of over 100 million people. And Great Britain, about 8,000 square kilometers smaller than Victoria Island, has a population around 60 million. So can you guess the population of Victoria Island? Well, it's about 2,100 people, and they live in only two settlements, Cambridge Bay on the east and Uninhabited on the west. These two settlements are several hundred kilometers apart. Cambridge Bay is the larger with around 1,700 people, while Uninhabited has about 400 people. The settlements have a few roads and streets within them, but there's not 500 kilometers of road joining them across barren Arctic nothingness. So the only way to access either community initially is by air, and this makes them incredibly remote and inaccessible. The barrenness of northern Canada is truly remarkable and strains the imagination of most, unless you're truly a geography aficionado. The entire Canadian Arctic Archipelago has a population of roughly 14,000 people spread across thousands and thousands of kilometers of land and sea. So imagine for a second driving from Texas to Minnesota, if you're an American, that's pretty far. And then you cross the border from Minnesota into Manitoba. So now you drive the same distance north, you keep going north, and now you might get to the shore of the Arctic Ocean. And that's not even really a possible drive. There's a couple roads that do it, certainly not from Manitoba, you kind of have to go out west, but that distance is what we're kind of getting at. And even then, you're gonna just hit the shore of the Arctic Ocean. And now the Arctic Archipelago starts there, and it goes once again that entire distance to the North Pole. So imagine that, the north-south distance of the continental United States, but it's all a barren Arctic tundra with only 14,000 people spread across all these islands. And of course, you have to keep this in mind, this famous stat that half of Canada's 40 million population live below this red line. Basically in southern Ontario, and the line extends into Atlantic Canada. So it's really insane that if you're up in the Arctic, you're so far away from most of Canada's population. This is one of my favorite pictures, just to give you an idea of how epic, raw, and isolating these lands are. This is Mount Thor on Ellesmere Island, and it's known for being the highest completely vertical drop on planet Earth. This is still about 1,500 kilometers from Victoria Island, our initial talking point, but I just love this picture. It's just so insane and gives you sparks the imagination of what it's like up there. Okay, so on this chart, which I filled in, Victoria Island is in purple. The 6 islands in red are all uninhabited, and these 6 red uninhabited islands are among the 10 largest uninhabited, desert islands in the world. 2 others are in Antarctica, while the other 2 are among Russia's northern islands. Each one of these ones in red are larger than countries like Jamaica, Kuwait, or Cyprus. And again, they're uninhabited, all of them. And here's a nice chart labeled of all of the Arctic archipelago islands. It's over 1.4 million square kilometers in area, which could be a top 20 country in landmass alone, just the Arctic islands, not the rest of Canada. So the islands alone are larger than Peru, Angola, Egypt, nations of this size. And again, the population is 14,000. It's just truly insane. So, what about Victoria Island in particular, the location of Perfect Dark's crash site stage? Well, interestingly, because Victoria Island is so huge, if you go to Wikipedia, it gives you its coordinates of 71 degrees north, 110 west, which is roughly in the center of the island. But if we do go another 8 degrees of longitude to the west, we're still on the island. This red marker here is exactly 71 north, 118 west, and it's roughly 30 kilometers from the settlement of Uninhabited. So imagine, according to the lore of Perfect Dark, crashing in this situation and having to figure out where you are and hopefully getting it right and then trekking 30 kilometers to some kind of salvation only to come across this. This is the humble settlement of Uninhabited. 400 people, likely enough people and supplies here to, help some minor wounds and give you a meal, but maybe not much more. There's nothing else around for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. Nothing but the vast landscapes you see here and beyond. The land looks truly alien, which actually fits the theme of Perfect Dark very well. Especially given the irony that it's a hostile race of aliens which causes the plane to crash in the first place, and a friendly group of aliens who help with the rescue. And so the crash site was pretty well chosen by the developers of Perfect Dark, and it is a pretty good geographic representation of what this area would look like in the winter if a plane really did crash there. Uninhabited would maybe be used as some kind of staging grounds or base of operations to further launch into the rescue, or they might go from Cambridge Bay 500 kilometers away. But really the most practical way to travel around on this island is snowmobile. And that kind of fits having the hover bike on the Perfect Dark stage. There's a good reason this area is so sparsely populated. The community of Cambridge Bay has never recorded a temperature above freezing between the dates of October 31 and April 19. So that's a pretty long winter. You can take a look at the climate data from Wikipedia for Uninhabited, which is, again, similarly intense. Cambridge Bay has pretty full Google Street View coverage. You can kind of scroll around and check it out, and that's always cool to explore that. I spend many hours doing that. And Uninhabited has a few Google spheres now, which are quite something to ponder. And yeah, so I was quite surprised when I saw Victoria Island as the location of the crash site. According to the Perfect Dark story, the president was flying from the airbase in Alaska to Oslo, Norway, for some kind of G20 meeting or whatever they have in the in-game lore, which would make sense, for that type of meeting. But I'm not sure that flying over the Canadian Arctic Archipelago would be the best idea, exactly because there are so few places to stage an emergency landing, and rescue operations would be very difficult. So, the flight path could be more intelligently designed to go somewhere else. But then again, I know lots of planes do fly over here, so who knows? I imagine one of the developers just picked it as a remote enough sounding island that made enough geographical sense in order to make a cool stage, and they certainly succeeded in that. But hey, did you know that Perfect Dark's crash site stage is supposed to take place on this remote northern Canadian island? That's pretty cool. And yeah, so this is a channel I've wanted to launch for a long time. I've had this video topic in mind for a while. I thought, why not put it here? This Canada Calamity channel, I'm going to post some videos about Canadian geography, Canadian history, lore, maybe things that are happening in news and current events and so on. But we'll see, we'll see how the channel evolves, and just happy to get this first video out. I hope you enjoyed. Stay true, my friends. Pack some warm clothes, and I'll see you in the next stream or video. Oh yeah, and subscribe, please, if you're seeing this and you do want to see more of that stuff, because, I want to get to 1,000 subs and be able to monetize this channel and whatnot, so huge thanks if you subscribe.